Hello, everyone, and welcome to the summer webinar series on competency restoration, brought to you by the Texas Judicial Commission on Mental Health. I'm Molly Davis, a staff attorney at the JCMH. The Judicial Commission on Mental Health was established in 2018 with the mission to engage and empower court systems through collaboration, education, and leadership, thereby improving the lives of individuals with mental health needs, substance use disorders, or intellectual and developmental disabilities. Competency restoration is just one piece of our work. Today, we are so excited to take a deeper dive into jail-based competency restoration and court-ordered medications. We've got a lot to cover in just 1 hour. So if you have a question, put it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take them up at the end if we have time. And now please welcome Jonathan Lemuel from Bluebonnet Trails Community Services. Jonathan is the director of Jail Diversion, which means he works closely with the local jails in 8 counties in Central Texas to facilitate discharges for people whose arrests are a direct result of mental health symptoms. He also oversees the continuity of care for people at state hospitals and coordinates aftercare when people are discharged from the hospital. He's also a frequent speaker and a trainer for law enforcement, jailers, and legal professionals like lawyers and judges. Jonathan, it is all yours. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I think you can see my screen, right, Molly? Yes,
Yes,
no, maybe.
we can. Everything looks great.
All right. So, as Molly said, I am Jonathan Lemuel. I do have a title change. My title is actually the Director of Forensic Services at Bluebonnet Trails. I don't put it out there quite a bit, but that is who I am. So we're going to talk about JBCR, and we're also going to talk about the forced meds, and we're going to kind of look at it from a clinician's point of view, kind of how we did things here in Williamson County and a couple of the other counties where we actually are doing forced meds. My first slide here kind of shows all the partners all the players that are at the table as we're actually starting to do forced meds. We always have the client. We're always going to look at the best interest of the client. And we have to make sure all the other parties are there, the county attorney's office, district attorney's office, the sheriff's office, where the jail is. We also got to follow the standards of, the Texas Health and Human Services. So we incorporate everything in there as we start to work through that process. With court-ordered meds, as you start to look at court-ordered meds, a lot of facilities get a little worried about doing court-ordered meds because you're getting ready to compel someone. So we want to make sure that we're looking at, it's done in the best interest of the individual, of the client, their psychiatric condition, their quality of life, and it's for their competency restoration status. Usually when you start to actually working with them and they're in the jail, they're refusing a lot of medications. They're refusing a lot of services because they really don't understand what's going on. Their symptoms are kind of getting in the way of them being able to think very, very clearly at that time. So as we start to actually work with them, we start to try to figure out, what is going on? What we have to weigh the risk versus the benefits of the medication due to the condition of the client. So as we're working with them, my staff, they're in the jail, before we ever even get to getting ready to compel someone, we're trying to talk to them, we're trying to educate them on the importance of taking medication, how it's going to help them with their quality of life. And we're also talking to them about what some of the different medications are, what the effects will be of these medications, what is actually going to help them with once they actually start to take those medications. And sometimes you don't have to do forced medication, because after you kind of talk to them and start to work with them a little bit, then they decide that they are going to go and at least try the medication. Usually after a couple of tries, things kind of clear up, and then they continue to want to take those medications. But if it doesn't work out, then you have to look at, what are some of the benefits to it? It's going to shorten their time in the jail. It's also going to, decrease some of the other things that happen in the jail. It'll be really important for competency restoration. With our wait time right now to get into the state hospital, if we actually start to compel them into jail, usually they come around and we're able to get them restored right there in the jail before they ever actually have to do any competency restoration or even leave the jail. So we improve their quality of life. Once they get the medication started, the longer a person stays in the throes of psychosis, the more damage they do to their brain. So if we're able to get them started on medication, their quality of life is really going to improve. The time that they're actually waiting to actually get into the hospital is, that time may go all the way away. They may not even have to go to the hospital. With the jail, inside the jail, we're going to have less possibilities of self-injurious behaviors, less possibilities of the client getting hurt, less possibilities of staff getting hurt. We're going to reduce the chances of those uses of force that happen against a client that's in the throes of psychosis. It's going to actually improve the whole picture of this continuum of care. Is we're actually working with that client there in the jail to actually get them through the court system with getting that medication started. And it's really going to help the jailers out, because it's going to, less budgetary restraint, because you're going to have less destructive behaviors. You're going to have less uses of force. You're not going to have to bring in so many deputies. You're not going to have to be taking the client in and out of the jail over to the hospital for things that may have happened while they're in there. So you're going to really, really improve that relationship between the client and the jail. Also, we're going to decrease the length of time at the hospital once those medications are started. Because if they don't regain there in the jail, then once they get over to the hospital, they're already on the medication. So the hospital doesn't have to spend that much time actually getting the medication restarted. So if we get into where we actually have to compel that client, in Texas, we have a two-step process. Everything starts out at the probate court. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a mental health professional. So, I'll kind of go through this a little bit. I'm not going to dig a deep dive into the law side. We have Chris Lopez, who could also will step in and help if things kind of get there in the weeds a little bit. So everything starts out at the probate court. It's filed there, and if the case is lost in the probate court, then it moves over to the criminal side, and then it goes under Article 46B. So with the probate court, you're looking at the capacity standard. The client lack of capacity to make decisions regarding administration and the purpose of the medication, and the treatment proposed for the medication. Treatment proposed in medication is the best interest of the patient. The civil or forensic inpatient. That's all under 574. So as we're looking at that, we want to try to educate the client and talk to the client. And then we also want to talk to the attorney. And if the attorney doesn't really understand what's going on there, and kind of give them some different aspects and different things to actually look at, is they're actually working with that client and talking to them. Then there's also the dangerousness standard that we have to look at. Was the patient ordered, to receive inpatient services by the criminal court? So that's under 46B. And as we're starting to work with them and figuring that process out, we still have to use, 574 still comes back in there. If the client's waiting in jail for at least 72 hours for a transfer to an inpatient competency restoration facility, we're going to look at, what's been going on. What has the client been doing? I mean, is the client presenting as a danger? Is the client actually acting out there in the jail? What was going on to lead up to where we're getting ready to force medications or talk about using, compel medications? Because the client is incompetent to stand trial or a jail detainee. We're going to really look at a lot of this is all laid out in the 574 as you're kind of looking at what the dangerousness standard is. Danger to self, danger to others, and deterioration also kind of falls under there. So we're going to assess sort of the mental health conditions and see where the client is, what's going on, what's happening with that client right now. Is we're trying to figure out, what is going to be the best laid plan is for what medication we're actually going to use. What's happening with the client? What are they doing there in the jail? What physical harm are they doing to themselves or to another client or anyone else there inside of jail? This is you're going to compelling medication also happens at the inpatient facility. But I'm mainly looking at what's going on right there in the jail. What are we doing with them? How are we getting to be able to keep the client safe, keep the jail safe, keep down on those uses of force. And then also with our long wait for, state hospitals, and we're actually starting these compelled clients there in the jail, we're seeing a faster turnaround. Sometimes the clients are never having to come into what we call our jail-based competency restoration program, or even go to our outpatient competency restoration program, or even ever transition over to the state hospital because they actually got these medications started. They were compelled in the beginning, and they never had to be placed in a facility outside of the jail. With compelling someone and actually working with those clients, usually there's a show of force for the first time, and then usually after that, the client usually complies, and they start to take that medication on their own, and they start to see the benefits of the medication, and they start to see a better quality of life. So it's a little stressful at times for smaller jails. Some of the jails that I've worked in weren't really interested in doing force meds until we actually went and talked about it and talked about, getting the client actually on these medications and seeing, their quality of life change, seeing, less uses of force, less problems happening right there. And they're a lot easier to deal with. And they're not in the jail as long once they actually get the medication started. So we want to look at what's the best medication for the client at that time that's going to cause the least amount of side effects. So we want to give the doctor as much information as possible as they're actually choosing that medication for the client. We also want to take into account their religious beliefs. Some religions don't believe in medication. Some cultures don't believe in mental health. So there's a lot of education that's done there also with the client. Sometimes the attorney is not able to do that. Sometimes the doctor is not able to do that. But the local mental health authority we are housed in a jail. We kind of take that role and kind of work with the client and talk about, the risk and the benefits of actually being on this medication and educating them that, this medication is going to give you a better quality of life. It's going to help you get through your court proceedings a lot faster. And you're going to have less issues right here in the jail where you are. And then we talk about, what is the medication going to prevent if you actually try this medication? And we talk about, the consequences to the patient, if the medication is not administered. The longer they're prolonged without treatment, what's actually happening? We talk about you're actually damaging your brain and all the other things that are going on. We want to actually talk to them about that and make sure that they understand that. Sometimes they don't, but once you actually get to start to compel them and then they start to actually take the medication and as we're still working with them and talking to them, you start to see a total different person. Alternative and less intrusive treatment likely produce the same results as medications. Most of the time, if we're at the point where we're actually talking about compelling someone, we've tried everything else to actually try to figure out what is going to be the best way to actually get them to become competent, to actually work with their lawyer and do all these different things. At this point, we're actually looking at, what is the best medication to actually be able to help them to be successful, to kind of move through this process. And also we're going to always, a lot of this also backs back up to 574, where we're actually going to go in the health and safety code is we're actually looking at getting ready to compel that person. So once we've got the medication compelled, and then, on the criminal side, if we have to move from the probate court over to the criminal court, then it is less of a burden to actually be able to get forced medication in the criminal court because there's less that you have to actually prove up. Not really going to get into weeds there, but on the criminal side, the amount of time that a person can be compelled is a little longer than the amount of time that it is on the probate court. Because on the probate court, you're compelled, and then once you've been found competent, it's 180 days afterwards. On the criminal side, it really does not have a set amount of time that you can actually be compelled after you've been found competent. So most judges, most prosecutors or defense attorneys are also always going to ask for that amount of time to be kind of figured out there so that it's not an endless order. So as we transition over to what we call the JBCR program, here in Williamson County, as we were getting ready to work on actually starting up our JBCR program, we actually created what we call the Candyland chart. And this is because it kind of, has the same things there, is we're actually starting to figure out how to work with those clients and figure out what's going on there. So once we found out somebody is incompetent, we're going to ask for that independent evaluator to actually come in and actually do the evaluation. So we're going to get that order signed and get that person transitioned over to be evaluated by the forensic psychiatrist. So if that person is evaluated, usually we use, in Williamson County, we use Dr. Maureen Burrows to do most of those evaluations. So that order's signed, she comes in, she does her thing, she sees the client, does the evaluation. Either the client is returned back as competent or incompetent. If the client is returned back to possibly be competent, we have a waiver of objection that's actually signed by the attorney and the defense attorney, and those court proceedings start up and they start to kind of move along through the process. We're trying to figure out what disposing of the case. But that client comes back incompetent, then we have another order that's found, they're found incompetent. Everything is sent over to the state hospital clearinghouse, and the process actually gets started for that client to actually wait for their date to be transitioned up to the state hospital. And then they're going over there on their 120-day commitment. So with our JBCR program there in the Williamson County Jail, we actually asked for another order to actually be signed. We saw this when we went out to Harris County. They actually kind of used some of the same processes that I was able to take from a bigger county, and we kind of figured out how to make it come down to a smaller county where we can be able to use all these same processes. So then we start to work with the client on this order right here. The judge signs an order. My LPHA there in the jail, Amanda, she actually, once she gets this order, then we start to do what we call our JBCR screening to figure out, is this somebody who's going to be appropriate for JBCR, or is this client also could be appropriate for OCR, which is outpatient competency restoration. So we're screening for both of them at the same time as we're actually working with that client and doing that screening. So once we feel like that client is appropriate for JBCR, then Amanda is going to actually write that letter back to the courts, telling the courts, we feel like this is an appropriate client for JBCR. These are the things that we're going to recommend. If we have an availability right then, we're going to pull that client in. If not, we're going to place that client on a wait list. And as soon as we have a bed available and that client fits into the current milieu that we have, we're going to transition that client over to what we call our J-Pod there in the Williamson County Jail. So then we ask for another order. Actually, this order is actually signed, saying that they're actually going to come over and they're going to start doing jail-based competency restoration. Says the amount of time that they're going to be coming over for. So as we have all of these things in place, as we're actually working with the client, we're able to show them and talk with them about the different orders that are in place. Talk to them about why they're actually transitioning over to actually work with us there in the jail. Through this whole process, all our jail team has actually started to work with the client since day one when they actually came into the jail. So most of our clients that we're actually working with that actually may come into our JBCR program has started out with our jail diversion program downstairs in the jail on the 1622 to start figuring out what's going on there. So we've already sent those letters over and we kind of know what's going on. We kind of know where those clients are as we're actually transitioning through this process. So now we have the order so that they've been found incompetent, they're able to transition over to our JBCR program. So we're gonna look at, what does the eligibility actually look like to actually come into our JBCR program? So with our eligibility, we're gonna make sure you have to be in custody and you have to be deemed incompetent to stand trial to actually transition over. We want you to actually have a mental health diagnosis, something that we can actually be able to grasp and be able to work with to kind of figure out, what's going on, what medications do we need to be looking at, how are we gonna actually be able to assist you and figure out what's going on. We always want to make sure that you're actually, it's a psychiatric medication. If you already on forced meds or you already agreed to take medication, then that's less time that we're going to have to spend with you actually trying to figure out getting you compelled and doing all those things where you're on our unit. We want to make sure that you're already on medication, so we're not having all those like uses of force or any other issues. No disruptions right there on the milieu is we're actually working and doing competency restoration. Our goal on the unit is to do training and competency restoration from, usually we go from right around 9 to probably about 4 o'clock, where the clients are up and they're out and we're actually working with them doing competency restoration stuff. Either they're doing individual or they're doing a group. We also want to make sure that they have a willingness to attend. We want to make sure that everybody who comes in actually wants to be there and actually wants to actually regain competency and wants to participate in the program. We talk about, that everything on our pod, is a privilege. It's not a right. We talk about, daily programming. These are things that you actually have to wake up for. You actually have to get out of your bed and you actually have to come out and actually participate and be there and be attentive. So we have the different things that, the team always wants to be able to have. We want to have the competency evaluation so we can figure out, what were the deficits that this client may have had so we know exactly what we're working on. We want to see the probable cause affidavit so we can kind of talk to the client, basically this is why you're here. We're not going to go deep down in the woods and say, what did you do? We want to know why you did this and what was going on. That's irrelevant. We want to make sure that we have the PCE so we understand what they're actually being charged with, so we can talk to them about what their charges are. Talk to them about the amount of time that they're actually going to be, that they could actually do for that offense. We want to look at their jail records. What happened the last time they were in jail? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? We're also going to dig into the care database, because everybody who lands in our jail wasn't always originally from our county. Maybe they're from another county. So we want to see what else was out there. Did they ever go to another state hospital somewhere? Or were they ever treated by another LMHA? So we want to gather as much information as possible as we're actually doing that. So then we get into the recommendations and we start to look at, they're eligible, which program is going to be the best program to actually fit them. We talked about, getting them on our wait list. We have a very short wait list, so we're able to transition people in really, really quickly. If they're not eligible for JBCR, we send that letter over, but that does not stop them from actually getting into JBCR. They may not be eligible, this week, but 2 weeks later, things may have kind of calmed down for them. Medications kind of started to start to take effect and they're starting to, get the benefits of the medication, then at that time they may be ready to be transitioned over to our program. Sometimes there's more information needed. So sometimes people come into our program that may have had a diagnosis from somewhere else or another state. So the team is actually digging to try to figure out, what happened in that other state and what was going on. Can we get that information? Can we get some information from family members to actually start to work with that client to figure out what was going on to actually help them transition over to us? I put our team up there. This is the current team that we have. It's a very small team. Myself and Dr. James, we were kind of the 3,000 miles up and actually looking. And we moved down to Amanda, Liliana, Nicole, and Richard Guzman, who we recently just hired. They're and Courtney Bearden, they're the boots on the ground. They're right there in the pod every day, working with them and try to figure out what's going on, what's happening. Our JBCR team is very unique. It's a bilingual team, as well. So we don't have to worry about that. Some of those language barriers. We're able to work with the client and meet them where they are. All right, so then we get into what does our pod actually look like? So as we get into, we say welcome to J-Pod. When the clients actually walk in to this pod, they actually see that it doesn't look like a regular cell, a regular jail pod. I mean, it's a 48-man tank with, 6 8-man podlets there. But when they walk in the door, they see the bean bags, they see the artificial trees. They see there's a carpet in there. They see there's some different all the chairs, the seats there in the jail have a seat cushion on them. So we're in jail. I mean, there's a lot of things you can't change about a jail, but we try to make it as therapeutic as possible as they're kind of transitioning over. Some of these guys have been in jail for quite a long time, and sitting on steel all the time kind of gets a little painful. Now you're able to sit down on a oversized bean bag and have a little comfort there. You can see right there in the in the window there, you can see where the clinician is there actually working with a client, doing individual counseling there. So everything happens on our pod where it's there. We're actually able to do individual someone who needs something individual, minus they're not able to work with the group. So the group can be doing something and we can still be working with someone individually at the same time. We actually did a couple things there. You can kind of see the mirror position there. And that's, give the client the option and also keep everybody can actually see because the guard is sitting there, the guard can look into the pod and be able to see the mirror and see exactly what's going on. There's a mirror on both sides. The mirrors kind of play off of one another. So we can see what the client's actually doing under the table. And we can also see what the clinician's doing. So we're keeping everybody honest to make sure there's nothing happening there that shouldn't be happening. So there's no problems that are going to come out of that. Right there on the post, that's usually where the officer is sitting at. And that officer just kind of monitors what's going on. Some of the officers are, they actually come down and actually participate and actually work with the clients as we're actually teaching group. When we have mock trials, sometimes if we're a shorter person, and we need a officer to actually, be the bailiff, that officer actually come down and be the bailiff and actually help us run a mock trial for the clients. So for curriculum, we use the curriculum that was being provided by the state of Texas, that's being used across all of the JBCRs. We do a lot of art therapy there where we want to know what do you think competency is? Where do you see yourself at when you actually come in? So we have the picture there of, what does incompetency actually look like? And what does competency actually look like? for a competency is a really, it's not a lot that people get competency confused with, competency in the legal system is, can you work with your attorney? Can you make a rational decision and be able to provide the right information over to your attorney without your mental illness getting in the way? And sometimes people want, their mental illness to totally go away before they're willing to say that their client is competent. So sometimes people can be mentally ill and competent at the same time. So, that's kind of like that's the educational factor there. Just because someone starts out on medication, schizophrenia is not going to go away. They're going to be able to manage those symptoms of schizophrenia to be able to live a quality of life. Their depression is not going to go away. The medication is going to help them be able to live a quality of life. So, some of their symptoms are not going to go away. I mean, they're going to understand that, yes, they're hearing voices. These voices are there, but I understand that these are voices and they're not real. I can actually be able to work with my attorney and get through this process and be able to say, yes, these voices are there, but I'm able to kind of put that to the side and be able to work on my current case. So that's the psychosocial part that we actually work with them in the program, trying to help them to actually understand their mental illness. So then we have so JBCR, the beneficiaries. So the state of Texas and Williamson County, we have a reduction of referrals over to the state hospital. So since the induction of our program last August, we've sent 2 people out of the Williamson County Jail to the state hospital. We've sent one guy out of the state hospital, one guy out who came in and he was not really familiar to us as a local mental health authority, and he was having tons and tons of issues. So we actually worked with the Jail Inreach Project to get him an expedited bid over to Vernon to be able to get him stabilized so that he could be handled in the jail. His behaviors were really bad. The things that he was doing, there was a lot of uses of force. He was being transitioned from the infirmary to the violent cell pretty much on a daily basis. He was either going to really hurt himself or he was going to hurt someone else in his throes of psychosis. He was not taking care of himself. He wasn't eating. He wasn't, cleaning, taking showers, doing all those other things. He was really deteriorating and decompensating there in the jail. So the best place for him at that point was going to be the state hospital, because by the time we were going to get him compelled and get him stabilized, there was a good chance that there was going to be things that were going to happen. So we were able to work with that and get him transitioned over to the state hospital. So we have efficient use of resources. We have all the partners are always at the table. I'm here with you guys right now, but my team is actually in what we call our JBCR roundtable, is where we meet with the jail, the courts, all the players there, all the community partners are all there talking about, what are our next steps? What are any hiccups we may have had for the month? Any issues that we're having between the jail and we're having between our program? Was there any issues with medications or any of those things? So all the community partners are right there, and we're talking about that, trying to figure out, how do we keep this program running really smooth? We have timely treatment for the lowest and the highest security. We're able to start to work with those clients and put that human factor back in there, and is a softer touch. I mean, jail is jail. Okay, jail is there for housing. It's there for what it's there for, but we've kind of transitioned over to where we're housing a lot of people with profound mental illness there. Then we need to try to figure out, what is it going to be able to, what can we do for them to be successful? What can we do to be able to help them understand, why they're there in jail and what needs to happen, help the jailers where it's an easier day for them. So we're doing all those things with the client there. Then you have the court. So we have reduction in court time for the IST cases. For right now, with our competency restoration program, we're averaging right around 40 days for someone to actually restore the competency in the JBCR program. For misdemeanor, usually that first psychotic break, we're averaging right around 50 days for those low-level misdemeanors that are transitioning through our program. So we have improved communication between the community partners. Is we're actually working with the courts. We meet with them on a weekly basis as we are working with them, trying to transitioning people into our program, out of our program, and figuring out where they are. The participant have a reduction in court and incarceration time. So if we're able to get them restored in that 40 days, and then within the next 10 days after that, or even less than 10 days, they're in the court. They're being restored to competency, and the court is actually figuring out what's the next step for them. Where are we going with this? What's going to happen with this case? Is this somebody who's going to be sentenced to TDC, or is this somebody who's going to go out on probation? We're providing all that linkage with them. We're actually doing looking at the connection to the community and aftercare. We look at everybody as we're actually working with them, and we talk about what their transition is actually going to look like. We give them a transition plan that says, hey, you're going to go back out to the community, and this is what the community is actually going to look like. These are the resources that are going to be there for you in the community. But we're not guaranteeing that just because you come through JBCR, you're going to transition out and you're going to go back to the community. You could be sentenced to prison. You could be sent off to a treatment center. All these different things are still there, but at the end of the day, you're still eventually going to get back home. And once you get back home, here are the resources in the community for you to remain stable. Here's the aftercare plan for you to remain stable, for you to actually be able to transition and have a quality of life outside of this current life that you're actually been living. We celebrate once they actually become competent, we actually have a mini graduation where we actually give them a certificate of competency. We do cake, or we do ice cream. We'll do something to celebrate that now you're competent, you're ready to take the next steps. And some of these guys have never had something like that. They've never been recognized as accomplishing something. So we give them that accomplishment, and they're very appreciative of it. We have what we call our aftercare unit there. So as long as you're actually not being disruptive on the pod, you can stay on the pod. And those guys who have been there for a long period of time, they're kind of like the ambassadors of the pod. So as you're actually transitioning over, you have that peer to be able to kind of talk to you about what the rules are, what you can and can't do, what's expected of you, how the pod is actually going to run, all the different things that are going to happen. You have that peer person to actually talk to, that's right there, that's kind of walking the same walk that you're walking. So we, in the peer, and those people in aftercare actually come out and participate, and just kind of, they're always going back through the same steps that they already went through. So we're making sure that they remain stable, so they can get through the court process, and not, we get them competent, they transition back over to the other side of the jail, stop taking their medication. We work with them until they actually get all the way out of the jail, or they're completely sentenced. So then when we get back to our Candyland process, once we send our letter over saying that, we feel like this person is actually competent, we actually start, we get that letter over, we get the evaluation. Dr. Burrows is usually our evaluator again. We get a reevaluation, we get that over to the courts. Then the courts are able to take those next steps to actually start to work with them and figure out where we're going to go with this case. We have the standard order where if we need an extension. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had to ask for an extension. We've been able to get everybody restored in the first 60 days. So we hadn't had to go over and ask for the extra 60-day extension after the first 120 days. Once they're found competent, we go back, there's a waiver of objection. Usually it's signed by, both parties, the district attorney and the defense attorney. And then, those proceedings actually start back up and that client is actually working with the courts. The big thing with being able to have what we call our round table is we're able to actually start to work with those lawyers. And while we were down in Harris County, actually seeing their program, Dr. Holmes was telling us, with people as they're getting ready to transition out and we feel like they're competent, bringing in the defense attorney and actually having the defense attorney actually be able to talk to their client and make sure that they feel like their client is competent before we actually move over to the next step. Because the defense attorney is not on board and don't feel like the client is competent, then we send everything over. They're still not going to be able to work together. Because most of the time when a defense attorney is meeting their client's not stable, so they really don't know each other and they hadn't been able to work with each other. But as we bring those defense attorneys in, we invite them in. If the client wants us to come in and sit in, as long as they're not talking about anything that client attorney privileges, we sit there with them so that they actually have that, they feel comfortable because they've been with us for 40 days or so. And we get that attorney's opinion. If that attorney feels like, yes, my client is ready, we're going to ask for that evaluation and we're going to get that evaluation done and moved on through the process. All right, so as we actually look at, before we had our JBCR program, we had a guy who got arrested on 4/26 of 23. On 5/13, he was deemed incompetent to stand trial. 5/25, he was added to the clearinghouse list. On 8/16, he was admitted into JBCR. On 10/10, he was deemed restored. On 10/27, we had the case resolved. So we were able to show that this process, we were moving clients through really, really fast. And this is an actual case that we actually did there in the jail. This same client, if we wouldn't have been able to get him in the JBCR program, having a JBCR program, he'd have went to the wait list, and the average time on the wait list for our jail at that time was 216 days. So he'd have went off and he'd have likely admitted on 12/27 of 23. He'd probably been there for about 120 days. He came back to the jail on 4/25 of 24. And then they would actually start those processes. So we were able to see and able to show the reduction in the amount of time for someone actually waiting to get into the state hospital, actually having a JBCR program right there in-house. These are numbers that they're not the current numbers. These are the numbers that we were using a while ago. So non-MSU, we had 34 people waiting. MSU, we had 8, so average it was 42. Our average wait time for Williamson County was 216 days for a non-MSU, 433 for maximum security. Combined right around 325. Now with having actually a JBCR program in there, we average right around 24 people on both lists. The average wait to get into our JBCR is right around 66 days from arrest. So from arrest and all the different things that happen with all those things, usually it's about 66 days and you're actually transitioning over and you're in JBCR, and we're kind of helping you figure out what's the next steps in your life. Looks like we have about 15 minutes left. We will open it up, Molly, to questions that I may be able to answer. If not, we will figure out how to get that answer back to you.
We sure will. And y'all, please forgive me, number one, Jonathan, for getting your title wrong at the beginning. I knew that you were the Director of Forensic Services. I don't know why I said your old title. I'm so sorry. But I'm also very pleased to welcome Chris Lopez, who's the Assistant General Counsel for the Texas Health and Human Services Commission with us today. Thank you both for being here. And also thank you, audience. Like, this is a very lively discussion in the Q&A. I'm excited about this. You will get the PowerPoint emailed out to you, along with information about how to claim your continuing ed credit. That's going out to everyone in the next few days. But let's start with our questions. This one is a continuation of a question that Chris Lopez had started to answer, but we were asking, is it considered a restraint when you force medication, specifically regarding a patient who is in psychosis and is self-harming?
Well, it's very, as I started to respond, it's fact specific as to whether or not there's actually a hands-on. The fact of the matter is, once there's an order for compelled meds, a show of force and actually forcing an individual is very rare. And again, I represent the state hospital system, so I don't know how it actually operates within the jail setting and JBCR program. But once an individual is in the state hospital, it is very uncommon to actually physically put hands on and immobilize a person to give an injection. More often than not, a show of force that you have people that can put a person either in a physical hold or the restraint chair is all that's required for the individual to say, yes, I'll go ahead and take the oral medication rather than the shot. But if there is actual physical restraint of the person, yes, that is a restraint.
Thank you, Chris. This one looks more like it might be for Jonathan. Jonathan, what screening tools do you use to determine whether someone is appropriate or qualifies for JBCR and also OCR?
We were able to get a couple of tools there from Harris County. Harris County as well as Tarrant County, also as well as Lubbock, Stark Care. And all of our screenings are done by an LPHA, which is a licensed person, and they're actually making those decisions and figuring out, what's going on with the client right there, looking at doing the risk assessments. We are not using the HCR, we're using a different risk assessment, but we're doing all of those different screenings and just figuring out where people are and what's going on to see if they actually fit into our milieu. We're a 48-man, we're a 40-man tank, but we don't bring on 40 at a time. We usually bring on cohorts of 5 at a time.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Another one for you, Jonathan. Can you share any information about the funding sources that make it possible for you to have an LMHA physician and other staffers who are right there in the jail?
We were awarded a grant from the from HHSC to actually it's a 2-year for to start the JBCR program, and that funds the staff there in the jail and the supplies that we need, and then we have a in-kind donation there, where the county does the in-kind match, where they actually provide the facility and the staff to actually be able to manage the pod. So it was pretty much a partnership between all the players in the beginning that we showed HHSC and Bluebonnet Trails to go on this adventure here, and with the Williamson County system.
Yeah. Do you think that you all will seek another grant, or do you think that the county will pick up those expenses once they see how valuable this program is?
I think we'll continue to seek the HHSC grants and seeing if we continue to be able to get that, because it's a value to the county as well as a value to the state. So as we look at it, we brought 37 people through the JBCR program. I think we were bringing in like number 38 today. So that's 38 people that never made it into the state hospital out of Williamson County. So, I mean, we were able to free up bed space for someone else to be able, maybe in a smaller facility that needed to get somebody into the state hospital. Those are just the numbers that actually came into JBCR. Those are not the numbers of people who were actually compelled on medication that never made it into JBCR. But after being compelled, and by the time it was time for them to actually come into JBCR, they were competent. So we were able to get them reevaluated and come off of the list and actually for them to be able to transition on.
Yeah, that is absolutely terrific. I got another one for you, Jonathan. Who is on your jail team? And does every local mental health authority in Texas have a jail team?
So who's on my jail team? I have a really unique jail team. We started out as a one-man operation, which was myself, probably about 17 years ago. And it really became very overwhelming for one person. So then I was able to get another person, and I've been able to kind of move up to 13 people now. So on our jail team right now in the jail, I have two QMHPs who are downstairs, kind of at the front door, as people are transitioning in. They're part of our jail diversion team. So we're trying to figure out if we can divert you at the front door as you're transitioning to, or we're writing up to 1622 and getting that information over to the courts. And once we kind of figure that part out, and you become incompetent, then you kind of move upstairs if you're into our JBCR pod, where we have the licensed person, we have the nurse practitioner, we have ETBHN, which is the MD that we actually use for our initial screenings. And then I have 3 QMHPs that are actually there doing the day-to-day, the teaching and actually working with the clients there on what the aftercare plan is actually going to look like. And one of those cues is actually continuity of care. So they're actually helping that client figure out what the transition is actually going to look like once they get out of jail. If they're going to if they're going to move on to TDC, we usually give them all the things that we would have gave them if they walk out the door, so they can actually put it in their property as they transition over to TDC. So when they do get out of TDC, they actually have all those resources to be able to move out and actually have a quality of life. And we also have one more forensic care coordinator that actually works over in the courthouse, that if someone actually comes into court and they're from the community, that care coordinator is also able to actually work with them to actually transition through the court system and help them with the linkage to getting into services. If they need an appointment or they need to be back on their medication, they can help them with that transition there.
Great. We have a data question. Do you have any data, Jonathan, on how many people on your competency restoration waitlist or who are currently in competency restoration services have done this before?
This is our first year. So far, we've only, out of the 37, we've had 2 that were rearrested and came through Williamson County Jail. One was for it was a misdemeanor. Then the other one was for, I think, a felon in possession or something. And then, so we hadn't been a very new program, only having 2 rearrests. We're starting to look at the data now, because after being there for a year, we want to see, what happened, where people are. The good thing about it is the team, since we're a small program, we can do some things extra. The team is always reaching out to the former client to make sure they're still successful out there as they transition from us. And some of the clients still call into the phone number there and let us know that, they're still doing the right thing. Or if they get out and they get into a bind and they can't figure out their medication, then they're able to call back in and the care coordinator is able to help them out there. But as far as data on where we are and what's going on, we haven't started to put that together to actually show it. We talked about that in our Monday meeting, with us coming up on 1 year of the program. Let's see where things are. Let's see what the surveys actually look like and start to put that information together.
Yeah, that is interesting. One more, Jonathan. What is the option for people who are incompetent and are not convinced that a restoration program is a privilege, so they don't want to participate in it? You talked a little bit about how having a good attitude and wanting to be there was criteria for admission to your JBCR. So I think this person is asking, what do you do with folks who aren't well and aren't seeing that benefit?
So far we've had one guy who's not well and is not willing to actually come over. And I think it's because of his offense and he's been to the state hospital before. So he's actually not willing to come over, not wanting to work the program. He wants to go down to the state hospital. I mean, he is facing a first-degree felony, and he's been down to the state hospital before, so he feels like, the state hospital is where he's going to get the best treatment that he wants to do. And I think the team talked to him about, the rules and having to wake up and having to be up and having to stay up and participate between 8 and 5. I think that's something that he did not want to hear because he wanted to do what he wants to do. So he did not want to come over to us. But we have had people who came over and felt like it was too much. So we had one guy who came over on a Monday, Tuesday, he asked to be transitioned back over to the other side of the jail. We transitioned him out. We came back in the following Monday. He was back on the pod. And we didn't have no issues out of him. He was willing to actually participate and do everything that we asked him to do. And he was a pretty model citizen. I mean, he still went off the TDC, but he was not a disruption on our pod at all.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. And so I think that this will be the last question. Jonathan, can you speak a little bit more to the kind of groups that y'all run on JPod?
So on JPod, we run, all of our groups are competency based. Sometimes on Friday afternoon, we have what we call a fun group where, they may just watch a movie or like during football season. On Sunday, the case manager actually came in and on Sunday check-in, she stayed there for the whole time to be able to watch the Super Bowl. So most of the groups are all competency driven. We talk about, what does the courtroom actually look like? When we were down at the San Antonio State Hospital, we were able to see some of the things that they did with the different things that they worked with the clients on for competency, and we were able to bring some of those things back. We were able to use some of the things out of the comp kit. We play Jeopardy, that's all based on competency questions. We play Pictionary, that's, drawing of, the courtroom, the different things in the courtroom, who's a bailiff, what is a bailiff doing? We do other groups that are more of psychosocial, where we're working on them. What does your day look like after the jail? What is the importance of, the importance of taking your medication, the importance of being able to talk about what your symptoms are, knowing who your support system is. We also work with them on different groups as far as, their reunification with your family. You got to have that support system out in the community. With the reunification, we have people who came over to the jail and been in our JBCR program and not from our area. And some of them hadn't seen their families in several years. So the team was able to work with them. This was in more than an individual setting and figure out where their family member is and then provide that linkage to actually for them to transition back. I feel like I have one of the greatest teams there doing this type of work, and they're really compassionate about it. We sent a guy back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, who hadn't seen his family in over 2 years. The information that they were able to find out, he was hospitalized for competency restoration in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So the team was able to reach out to that hospital, figure out what medication got him restored, work with the doctor to get him back on that medication, get him restored, get him reunified with his mother. And then the team actually came in, picked him up from the jail at 2 o'clock in the morning and dropped him off at the bus station. And mom called us, 14 hours later to say, I picked him up at the bus station, had an appointment, got him over to his appointment. She called us the next couple of days and talked about, all the different things that they're doing and all the appointments that he had and the success, and that she was really, really grateful for the transition to be able to have her son back that she hadn't seen in a couple of years. So there's even though we're in the jail, we're still doing the same things that, Chris's team would be actually doing down at the state hospital. Because I mean, if they don't have a successful transition plan, then 9 times out of 10, they're going to come back to jail. So we want to make sure that the transition plan is a successful one and they're not actually coming back in. And we have a small enough setting to be able to do that. So really push the aftercare part.
I think that's a really great point, emphasizing the human element behind all of this. These are our neighbors, these are our brothers and sisters, these are our friends and our colleagues, and they're our community members. And so I'm really glad that you brought it back to that, Jonathan. What a difference this is making. And y'all, we are at time. So thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you, Chris. We're so thankful for your time today and also your expertise in this area. To our audience, watch your email in the next couple of days for a copy of the PowerPoint slides from today, and also information on claiming your continuing education credit. That will all be there in the post-webinar email. We hope to see you all again on Thursday, August 15th, when we'll be talking with Judge Nelda Cassiotti about cases where the person cannot be restored to competency. What happens then? And if you want even more training on mental health, register for our annual summit. You can do that now. We've dropped the link in the chat, so it's right there for you. Thank you so much, y'all, and we will see you next time.